Good morning and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bluddworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's video is going to be a response video to J.Scott Garibay's Dungeons and Dragons and the Anchor Player video that he did about 2 days ago. I listened to it a few times, and what really surprised me was at the very beginning, when he first described what an anchor player is, I absolutely agreed with him. He was correct. Um, but as he then further, continued to elaborate on how he determined that a player was an anchor player, I think that he kind of lost either the train of thought or it just didn't connect up with his initial final conclusion of what makes an anchor player. And then he didn't take his argument to the next steps. And so that's why, I thought I want to do a response video. I want to be respectful of the fact that, he has his firmly held beliefs, and I'm probably not going to convince him, but hopefully we can find some grounds where there's some acknowledgement or just some self-reflection on maybe this is not the way to go, or maybe just to adjust some of his thinking there. And again, like I said, his initial his initial definition I absolutely agreed with. So this isn't a hit piece. Um, More so than it's just I'm trying to get even an understanding, or perhaps he'll come on and he'll clarify, slightly differently. So without further ado, let's jump right into this. I haven't done this kind of video before where I'm going to, show his initial video, and I'll also link it into the description, of this response video. But I'm going to run through it. I'm going to stop it a few times just to make some quick comments, and then when it's done or virtually done with I think his primary message, then I will come back and I will do my conclusion of it and what I drew from it, and then we'll go forward from there. So without further ado, let's jump right into this. Now, I'm hoping the sound quality comes out really, good. That way, I think you'll be able to hear it. I've double checked it a few times, so let's go.
Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to talk about anchor players. All right. So I've been thinking a lot about Dungeons and Dragons players, right? So recently my Sunday game folded, and what happened was I lost two anchor players, and I'll explain what anchor players are. And I had three players left, and I could have taken the three players I had left, and I could have swept in additional players. I already had people who were asking to be in the game, right? So I easily could have stood up a game with 2 to 4 to even 5 players, right? But I chose not to. I was like, let this fold, right? Let this table fold. Let it wrap, right? And then I get a fresh start, right? And I think there's a lot of benefits to a fresh start, and also time of year, right? Like, so I actually have 2 conventions coming up. I actually need time to prep for those conventions, for the one shots I'm going to be running at them. Well, I'm planning on running one shots at PhilCon.
I want to stop at that point just for a second. Is that he talks about his table, and he talks about his table as having 5 players, and 2 of those players are what he calls anchor players. And once he gets to the definition of what an anchor player is, then, Scott, I have to wonder, why are you why you're allowing to continue running your table even with only 2 anchor players, because your definition that I will let you get to is spot on of what an anchor player is, but why you would allow only 40% of your players at your table to be anchor players, that's what I kind of find confusing. So let me continue, or let you continue.
On, and I'm planning on running one shots at PAX Unplugged, right? So basically, yeah, I think that's it. That's exactly what it really made a lot of sense to just let this fold. But the reality is, the more I thought about it, I was like, well, why didn't I just play with the 2 players, with the 3 players I had, and then pull in at least 1 4th player. I had somebody who I had asked to be in the game, and actively left them off the list. And the reason why is I knew adding this other player would make the game worse for at least one other player that was already at the table.
All right, so again, you just answered your own question. Is why wouldn't I just continue with these other 3 players? Well, even in your own description, those other 3 players aren't anchor players, and the player that you were thinking of bringing in uh, was not going to be an anchor player, as well, and possibly a detriment to one of the other players you already had. So you're you're trying to fill the role of anchor players at your table, with players that you're already acknowledging aren't anchor players to begin with. So I'll let you continue.
Right. So the answer is anchor player. I lost 2 anchor players. I lost my narrative player and I lost my mechanical player. I had an attending player, I had a shenanigans player, and I had a dedicated player. Okay. Now the reality. So why were the attending player, the shenanigans player, and the dedicated player not enough? Why couldn't I have just run with them? Right. Well, here's the reason. One, the dedicated player is a very interesting guy. He really is an interesting guy. He loves Dungeons and Dragons. He loves dungeon mastering Dungeons and Dragons, and he loves playing Dungeons and Dragons, right? And I had run an online game in the Great Pandy when I had to, and we had run a complete campaign arc. Then I invited him back for another online game during Great Pandy. As soon as the lockdowns were over, I ended all online games, right? And then I started up a physical game, and the dedicated player, literally, as soon as he heard it was up, he was like, "Can I play?" And I was like, "Absolutely, you're welcome. Come on in." All right, so I brought him in, right? Now, the dedicated player is really fascinating. The dedicated player has everything necessary to be an anchor player and chooses not to, right? I think one of the things about being an anchor player is that you have to be willing to be an anchor player. Yeah, I think that's key. I think you have to know.
You see here, you're telling us that this player is dedicated, really loves D&D, loves DMing D&D, loves playing D&D, and yet he's not an anchor player because he doesn't choose to be an anchor player. But I think it sounds more like you're refusing to label him as an anchor player. He sounds like someone, and this goes to your definition that you'll eventually get to. He sounds like someone that other players and supposedly yourself would enjoy having at the table. He's dedicated to the game, he likes the game, he likes playing the game, he likes running the game. So he doesn't have to choose to be a player that others want to play with. He either is or he isn't. All right. And it doesn't require the label. You have to ask the rest of the players at the table, is this someone that you enjoy playing with? And if you're not thinking, or if you're thinking he has all of these qualities, all of these positive qualities, and all of these things that you would want to see in a player, but you're not addressing exactly like what is he actually doing at the table, that doesn't make him an anchor player. All right, you're just saying that you don't think that he's an anchor player because he's not choosing to be an anchor player. And that I'm kind of confused with.
Oh, you're an anchor player, and actually, different people would have to. You could just know you're a catalyst. You're one of the prime players in the game. You don't need to have in your head, I'm an anchor player, because anchor, I don't think anybody's ever used this term before. So I think I'm coining it. If I'm not, let me know. But there are definitely anchor players, and I'm going to explain what an anchor player is. All right, so my dedicated player absolutely could be an anchor player. He chooses not to be, so he couldn't serve in the game as an anchor player. There were two other people at the table. The attending player, I think that name tells you what they do. They simply attend. That's about all they bring to the table.
And I agree with you there. An attending player cannot be an anchor player. It's just a body sitting in the seat and rolling dice like a human dice roller. To use one of Shoner's comments about that kind of a player. So I agree with you again. That player is not an anchor player.
The shenanigan player, actually, I think he could be a brilliant dungeon master and a brilliant player, but he is there for the lulls, right? Which really kind of makes him suck. Like, I have to say, like, at the end of the day, I think he has everything necessary to be an anchor player and to be a tier 1 dungeon master, but because he's like, oh, I'm going to do this for the lulls, he stops himself from reaching tier 1 play as a dragon player, and he just certainly can't really be a tier 1 dungeon master. If
By your own definition, which I still haven't gotten to, of what an anchor player is, it sounds like at your table of 3 at this point that your shenanigans player is the only anchor player. Um, when you say, "Oh, he's there for the lulls," he's there for the fun. Um, he's the only player, from what it sounds like, that the other players are happy he's there, because that's what ultimately your definition of an anchor player is a player where everyone at the table is glad that they're there, uh, to have fun, although you don't like fun at the table, but it's that person is there and the other players at the table are happy that he is there or she is there. That's what you described later as an anchor player, and your shenanigans player sounds like he's the only one presently at the table that has that quality.
fun is your main goal, you're always going to suck at Dungeons and Dragons, in my humble opinion. Right? All right. So
Your humble opinion is wrong. Whether it's, like I said, your opinion can be wrong if it is so diametrically opposed to the whole purpose of gaming. That that's when your opinion can actually be wrong. It's if your purpose at the gaming table is to have fun, and that is infectious. All right. In other words, you're the kind of personality, that charismatic personality that you're asking for, and the other players want to engage with that person. The other players are like, oh, hey, great, the shenanigans player has made it to the session. All right, now at least we know we're going to have fun. That is, that is by far the best example you have so far at your table of an anchor player.
so let's put so those two players weren't going to be my anchor players. So I lost these two anchor players, and I'm like, I'm not running without an anchor player. So let's define now what an anchor player is. Okay. So what is an anchor player? It's a really fascinating question. So an anchor player is someone that other people at the table want to be at the table because that person is there.
There you go. You could have started with that and then gone into why you lost your two supposed anchor players, why you are running a table with only 2 out of 5 anchor players to begin with. All right. And then the one question which you do not get to throughout this entire video, all right, and this requires some self reflection, is are you an anchor DM? Because if you are an anchor DM, you are only going to allow anchor players at your table. You're not going to suffer having someone at your table where the other people at the table don't want that person to be there. Now, there might be a variety of reasons for that. Maybe they come to the table and they just don't know the game system, and then you have to have some patience and teach them the game system and teach them to your concept and your idolized view of what role playing is at your table, and this is what the social contract of your table is. I mean, absolutely, you give them some time to uh, you know, to enter into and access that entry point of your game table and learn. But at some point, if they're still not grasping it, and this could be a long period of time, this could be a very short period of time. It really depends on your tolerance of allowing a non-anchor player at your table. But at a certain point, you're going to say, "Listen, you're not a good fit," and then send that person. If you're an anchor DM, you're not going to suffer non-players at your table for a very long time. You'll give them a brief time to acclimate to what you're looking to do at your table, and if they can't meet up, you got to send them on their way. All right. But if you're only attracting non-anchor players, then you have to ask yourself, well, am I an anchor DM? I mean, am I running a table that is a table that other people want to play at? And that, I think, is the problem that you might be experiencing, is that your table isn't consistently an anchor table, and so you're not attracting more than 40% anchor players to your table. I think that your measure is might be a little bit too extreme as well, where it's like you clearly have players at the table that are probably anchors, but you don't want to recognize that, because they're there for fun and you're not there for fun. All right, and that's a big problem. I think that is if you're a DM and you're running a table uh, not to have fun, you're not going to keep players. I mean, it's the bottom line is that you're not running a tier 1 table. I mean, that's the furthest thing from the truth. Uh, you're running a table of convenience, possibly, like there's no other game out there for them to go to. Um, that's the kind of thing that you'll see, like in the comic book store or something, when someone's running a table and people just go there to play because there's no place else to go. So I think that you have to be a little bit more self-reflective here and ask yourself, am I an anchor DM? And the other thing I want to say is that your players are not going to be anchor players 100% of the time. It's an unreasonable expectation. You're not going to be an anchor DM 100% of the time. All right. Again, another unreasonable expectation to hold for yourself. But I would say that you all need to be anchor players at the table, um, greater than 95% of the time. I mean, it's almost has to be a given. And I will talk a little bit about my own table, and the table that I'm blessed with, the players that I'm blessed with, and why they make me try to be the best DM that I can. Am I an anchor DM? Not based on my own criteria, not based on my own like declaration that I am. I can only base that on what they have said. All right, and I'll get to that a little bit. And I think that that's something that you have to possibly look to, to elicit from your players is, almost like the Ed Koch. I'll use some an old thing. How am I doing? Kind of question. That's what you have to ask them. How am I doing? And that will be your best, your best measure of whether or not you're an anchor DM.
Period. That this person is more than just a strong build player. They are a person who understands narrative, understands sharing spotlight, is has the core, has the absolute core bare minimum to be a tremendous dragon player or dungeon master. What is that? Charismatic, confident, intelligent. Right? There are people who end up at Dungeons and Dragons tables that are not charismatic, are not confident, or are not intelligent, and they're never really going to reach the full experience of Dungeons and Dragons, and they certainly cannot be an anchor player, right? And so basically, I think, and that's so you have to be charismatic, confident, and intelligent, and actually. That is a filter, right? If you are charismatic, confident, and intelligent, generally people are going to want to sit at any table with you, whether Dungeons and Dragons is happening or not, right? So first of all, these are winsome people that other people want to spend time with. Now, I've been thinking a lot about this, like what makes a winsome person, right? And so I'm going to explain it. I think this is the key to a winsome person. A winsome person has an awareness that every conversation they ever have, they have a duty as a human being to make that conversation enjoyable for the other person on the other end of the conversation, right? They have to genuinely listen. They have to genuinely care. And when they talk, they need to say things that another human being actually wants to hear, right? Now, the ramifications of what I just said are massive, right? So let me give you an example between an anchor player and a non-anchor player. All right. Hey, Sally, anchor player. How was your week? Oh, rough week. Had some challenges. How was your week? Right. That's an anchor player.
I don't see how that makes someone an anchor player at your table. It's completely irrelevant from your table. So you had a very brief conversation. You asked the person how you're doing. Well, I had a kind of rough week, but how is your week going? I mean, I get where you're going. That this person is not going to burden you with all their problems and too much detailing. You do get to that with the next example, but neither of them is a criteria for what is an anchor player. Has nothing to do with your table.
Right? Here's a non-anchor player. Hey, Sarah, how was your week? Oh my gosh, my cat's bowel was distended, and I had to go to the veterinarian, right? And it made me sad, and I missed a whole bunch of work, and it was the last thing that happened, and this is the last straw with my cat, and a terrible thing happened, and my partner left me because I've been investing so much time and emotion into this cat. Now, let me tell you about this breakup. That's a non-anchor player, right?
Agree with you. It's annoying, to ask somebody that question, because and it gets it's a bad question to begin with. It's almost like a meme now. It's like if you ask somebody how are you doing, your expectation is actually you want them to hear all you want to hear is I'm doing fine. How are you doing? And that's it. All right. Nobody wants details, and I agree with you there because you're going to get to that point of nobody wants to hear all of that, and you're right. Nobody wants to hear all of that. That has nothing to do with your table. If that's a conversation that's happening at your table, then you as the anchor DM should be like, all right, well, let's let's try to put all of that behind you, and let's focus on this game session now. All right, and then engage in escapism. I know you hate that term, all right, but that is the purpose of it. Is that they can forget all of those problems. They can forget about their cat's bowel movements and focus more on actually playing at your game.
It's very simple, right? And unfortunately, some things have to do with Dungeons and Dragons, but some things impact Dungeons and Dragons that. Here's the issue: no one wants to hear your woes. I think that is the key to a winsome person. Is a person who just understands. No one wants to hear your woes, right? And people who don't understand that and think that entering into a conversation is an opportunity for them to unload, not winsome, never going to be an anchor player, right? People who carry their burdens on their own shoulders and do not bother others with them are winsome people and have the ability to be anchor players if they're charismatic, confident, and intelligent. Right? And so that's the issue. Is my two anchor players, they were just, you could always have a good conversation with them because they understood that there are people who just fundamentally do not understand the function of conversation. Many people think this is an opportunity for me to dump my emotional woes on somebody else, and it makes them unwinsome, and because they're unwinsome, it makes them completely incapable of ever being an anchor player. Period. Nobody.
Don't ask that question at your table, especially if it's almost game time. Welcome your player to your table. Be ready to start right into your session, um, and just roll from there. That question shouldn't be coming up during game time, and so you avoid that whole exchange, possibly a negative exchange, by just playing playing the game.
And that's the issue, is if you are not winsome, nobody wants to sit at a table with you. Any table. Doesn't matter if it's Dungeons & Dragons or not. Right? So in order to be an anchor player, you must be winsome, and then in addition to that, you must be charismatic, confident, and intelligent. Right? So that was this was a journey for me, because I really feel I needed to understand why I didn't continue with available players. And the reality is, here's the kicker. I have no intention of ever running without a single anchor player. Right?
Your table will never be a successful table if you are not running with at least 90% anchor players. If you're willing to settle for just one, your table's a disaster. It's going to fall apart. You need to have at least 90% of your players are anchor players, people that to play with. If you have one player that for a long period of time you suffer, and that player is not someone that everyone else at the table wants to play with, you're not an anchor DM. You're not doing what needs to be done. All right. You're not telling this person, hey, I'm sorry, this is just not the right fit, and let that person go. I know it's hard sometimes to tell someone sitting at your table, especially if it's a in-person table, such as you're doing. It's very hard to disinvite somebody from your table, but if they're not somebody that everyone at the table wants to play with, your table is going to collapse. And you have to be more open to the players that everyone else wants to play with, all right, and you're the odd man out here, like you're not having fun, then if you're not having fun, if you don't want that player at your table and you're the only one that feels that, you have to think, well, how am I approaching this wrong? Because you're approaching it wrong. Um, if you don't see something that everybody else sees, you have to question, well, what am I not seeing? Uh, or if you see something that no one else sees, you have to question yourself, and you have to say, well, why am I placing this label on somebody that is, that might not be accurate, and then question yourself about it. So I'll let you finish up here, and then I will do a little wrap up.
Right? I'm not, and I know dungeon masters who do it, right? Like they go and they just collect up a whole bunch of unwinsome people who need something to do with their Sunday night, right? And then they run. I ain't that person. I ain't, right? And the reality, so that's the reality of it, right? And it was a journey for me to learn this, right? All that is my humble opinion. It is my humble opinion that as a dungeon master, if you don't have an anchor player left, fold that game. Fold that game, right? I'm eager to hear your humble opinion. Let me know.
Okay. So, I mean, you just contradicted yourself because you just said I wouldn't run a table without all these winsome, individuals, all of these anchor players, and yet you have, you're willing to, and you're, then you're turning around and saying, well, too many other DMs out there uh, allow their table to just be run for fun, and these aren't winsome and charismatic, intelligent, confident, players. Meanwhile, your measure is taking place off the table. It's taking place. It's not really focusing on what's going on at your table. So let me switch views here, and so we'll go back to talking a little bit about it. So as I said, I try to be I try to be the best DM that I can be. I try to bring, my players to my table, and I do try to make sure that they're having fun. I try to make sure that my table is the place that they want to be at, and I don't put the label of, I'm an anchor DM, upon myself. I can only base it on what my players demonstrate to me. So, I've often said it. I have 8 players at my AD&D First Edition table. Um, those 8 players have been with me for more than 60 weeks, every single one of them, some of them as many as 65 weeks. So they've been at my table for 60 weeks. How do I know that my table is a table that they want to be at? They uniformly hate missing a session. And we've only missed one session in 65 weeks. All right. And it was because of me, being on vacation, that we actually missed a session. We just couldn't get a makeup session involved. So, that was my non-anchor DM moment there. And I've probably had some others as well where, ultimately I had to make a decision as a dungeon master, and my players accepted it because they are anchor players. They really are very, very good players. Um, but they might not necessarily have agreed with it, and so sometimes there's a fine line between being arrogant again about a rule and just being confident in your ruling and such. So sometimes it's like, I try not to be, well, because I'm the DM. I don't think I've ever said that to this particular group. But there are moments when anyone is not going to be the anchor at the table, and that's you have to have that expectation that from on rare occasions you're not going to be at the top of your game. All right, and that's the same for your players coming to the table. So I expect my players to be anchor players 100% of the time? Absolutely not. It's an unfair expectation. When at my table, we're kind of very fluid with our start time. Some people come in on, half an hour early. Sometimes they come in, at exactly the right time. Sometimes they'll send a message, hey, I'm going to be 15 minutes late or whatever. We're all adults. We all work. We all have family and life going on around us. And because we're adults, we have a social contract at our table that there's going to be a little flexibility in start time and everything, and a player, as long as a player says, hey, you know what, I'm having dinner with my wife tonight, I'm going to be 20 minutes late. I respect them for saying, yeah, I'm going to eat with my wife for 20 minutes and then I'll be right back to the game. That's dedication. But that kind of thing is going to happen, and that's fine. And oftentimes we have some fun with it, or, well, hey, we'll take a bio break. With that, that's being anchor players, because you're putting the game table in its proper context with real life. All right, that's first of all. The other thing that I know, that my table is a table that they really like to be at, and they like each other's company. Um, just the other night, on Tuesday, we play on Tuesday nights, so playing again tonight. The One of our players came in, like he let us know he was going to be a little bit late, and so when he came in, everybody at the table literally cheered. It was like, hey, he's finally here. He's here. Great. Now we can really get rolling into this thing. All right. And I know when my players are going to miss a session, I not only feel bad that they're not going to be there, like I feel bad that they're going to miss part of the story that gets generated by the other players while they're there. And so they're kind of missing out. So I feel bad for that purpose, because I think that what's going on at the table is something that everyone is looking forward to. So we all want everybody to be there. So all 8 players plus myself, everybody wants everybody else to be there. That's how I know that we have I have a table full of anchor players. All right. There isn't a single player at my table where I would say, I wish this person wasn't here. All right. And we wouldn't suffer that. I wouldn't make them suffer through that. When if we ever had the situation where there's a player there that, you know, a number of other players are like, no, I can't stand this guy, or this girl, she's got to go, or he's got to go. That's going to be done. All right, because that's what it is to run a table that's an anchor table. You know, Everyone at the table has to be 99% of the time, happy to be there. And they're only going to be happy to be there if, one, they're having fun. Because if it's not fun, they're not going to want to be there. That's the bottom line. So there, Scott, you are absolutely 100% wrong. It's not even an opinion. It is wrong. All right. It is just the wrong way of looking at the function of playing Dungeons and Dragons or any other tabletop role playing game or any board game or any kind of a game. All right. If you are running your table to do anything else but run a game, you're doing it wrong. And that's why you might be struggling to keep players engaged at your table. You're not attracting anchor tables because You are not trying to be an anchor DM. You're not trying to have a table full with anchor tables. You're too willing to settle for just one or two anchor players. But to carry the whole table forward, it's not going to work. You need to value their time and your time to the point that everyone at your table is going to look to be there the next week. They're going to be upset when they're not there. They're going to be upset when Sally isn't there. All right. Not just because they're missing out on Sally's company, but they're going to feel bad for Sally that she's missing out on what's taking place at the table. All right. And that's what I think that you really do need to self reflect and try to consider trying to create that atmosphere at your table. Uh, be less focused about telling the story that's some kind of a life lesson that you're looking to do at your table, and be more concerned about collectively everybody at your table running the game, role playing their characters, having a good time with each other, setting aside all of the issues of the world for a few hours every week, and yes, passing the time, having fun, and looking forward to that next session. You gave two examples of players that have conversations, and they were fictitious, players, in fictitious situations. So maybe you want to reconstruct that conversation. I had a conversation with one of my players. He came to me and he says, "Listen, this is something that I would like to see for my character coming forward." All right, and he says, "If it's possible, if you can work it into the story somehow, I would like for there to be some kind of an opportunity to do this." That's an anchor player. That's the kind of conversation that you want to see, all right, or you want to hear or have, because that tells you as a dungeon master that that player is not just in the moment at your table, but that player is thinking about the future of their character, the future of their character story, and what might be able to be done at future tables, down the road, future sessions down the road. All right. So that's an investment in your game that you want to see. All right. And it's an affirmation of, hey, I'm running an anchor table, because the players actually care about thinking about the game when they're not at the table. So that's one example. Another example I'm going to give you is in my Castles and Crusades game, which is, honestly struggling. All right, because I haven't gotten some things put into place that creates that continuity. Um, in that game, one of my players, and I described this in the last video, his character lost two fingers. And he says, "Hey, you know what? Instead of just having me go into town and going to the church and getting my fingers replaced with a spell, whether it be a cure serious wounds or a mending or whatever." There was another spell in Castles and Crusades that would actually bring the fingers back. He said, "I'd rather do an adventure from that church, like some task that they asked me to do in order to accomplish that." And so in that, again, it shows an anchor player. He's not looking to take the easy way out. He wants something that is story driven, um, and might be something that everybody else at the table can also engage with in order to accomplish that goal, instead of just saying, oh yeah, yeah, you go to the temple and the sixth level priest casts a spell on you and you pay for that spell. No, much more interesting. No, you go to the church and the priest asks you to do some task that the rest of the party, you will have to ask the rest of the party, hey, listen, I can get my fingers put on again if we go and we do this task. And so that's an anchor player, and that's being an anchor DM, because you're listening to your players, you're looking at how do I enhance the what's going on at this table in the context of the game, in the context of the story of the player characters, and in a role playing sense, that's what's going on. So, you know, I hope, Scott, that you don't take too much, offense. I tried not to be overly, overly negative. I just wanted to point out the few, I think, disconnects that you have, because your basic premise, I agree with. It's just your continued elaboration on it. It became muddled, and then maybe there's some room for some self reflection to look back and then question. Well, am I trying to be the anchor DM? Am I trying to run my table as a table where players want to be there? So ultimately, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Scott, I welcome you to comment. I welcome you to respond on your own channel if you want to do a response to it. But ultimately, I hope that you at least listen to some of my ideas, and maybe you'll see that there's potentially some common some common ground between the two ideas. So anyway, thanks for joining. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.